Geoff Wilson here, Polar Explorer, training in the Arctic for yet another cold and freezing journey, living on the ice for an extended period of time. So I'm here today to talk about living on the ice. How do you camp and do well and prosper in this environment? Like everything else out here, it's about moisture management. So making sure that you're venting properly while you're traveling, not getting sweat and ice and moisture into your layers, layering properly so that you're comfortable during the day, taking layers off when you're hot. The same thing applies to your tent life. Set a really good tent. Be proud of your tent. Use the snow flaps that you'll have to stitch on yourself. They don't come standard. The Hilleberg tent range I've tested in probably the most severe storm I've ever heard of in Antarctica, and it survived, so they've got my loyalty. There are other great makes out there. Hellsport from Norway, for example, some of the North Face tents are used in the alpine environment, so there are other options, but for me the Hilleberg is what I'll stick with for the rest of my adventure career. I'm going to run you through several things with your tent setup. Make sure that you are taut to the ground. Obviously do your snow flaps. Make sure you tension your guy lines. It's always best to put snow pegs in, wait for 10 minutes and then tension, because they will set. If you tension straight away, you'll just pull them out of their bedding. So put your pegs in, wait for 10 minutes, go do something else, and then come back and tension. Make sure that you are longitudinally facing the prevailing wind, and if you're concerned about weather coming in, build a snow wall or an ice wall on the upwind side of the tent. Build it fairly close to the tent because you want it to push snow over the tent. You don't want it far in front so that it drops snow on your tent. These little things all make life so much more comfortable. The inside of the tent, it is important to be orderly. You need to be able to find everything in the dark. In this situation in the Arctic, we've got a short period of dark, or in Antarctica generally you're in the summer daylight, so it's not so important, but here everything needs to be orderly. If there's a bear coming, you want to know exactly where your bear flare is, your spray, or if you've got a weapon, obviously you know where that is. You want a designated kitchen area with everything nice and tidy. Your gas, your spare stove, where is that? Your food in a separate box. I tend to sacrifice a little bit of weight just to have my food and kitchen area orderly. All your electronics best to be in a bag that you can zip up, because once again the inside of a tent, the stove coming on and off, has massive fluctuations in moisture, so you don't want electronics gear open. If you get moisture in the circuitry, it'll freeze and damage the circuitry, so zip that up at all times. Keep your gear away from the moisture. Clothing all packed away, and my favorite sort of sleeping setup is a Z-mat with a nice thick insulated air mattress, and then 1 or 2 sleeping bags depending on the environment and the temperature. So coming into your tent, anything you don't want moisture on, put in the vestibule. So my sleeping bags are out there until I need them tonight. Kiting harness, obviously I don't need inside. Electronics on the right hand side. My little comfort pillow. Clothing in stuff sacks so they don't take up moisture. My gloves, toiletries, electronics bag, kite skiing boots, map case, pee bottle, water bottle, cup, obviously snow melting pot, my stove with my inReach nice and handy, sat phone in here, Nordic skiing boots, and obviously my food box. So everything's orderly. I've got a Z-mat, an air mattress. Obviously using a stove in a tent is contrary to regulations because so many people die in tents. So don't take this lightly at all. Obviously in this environment, you don't survive if you don't learn how to run a stove in a tent. So the major cause of death from stoves and tents is not fire, it's actually monoxide poisoning. So when you're lighting a stove, be conscious of the airflow in the tent. So make sure you've got big airflow going one way. A lot of people will have an exit but not an entry. I'll always make sure if I'm camped upwind, facing upwind, I have an open vent at the front as well, so that we're getting full airflow through. When it's really cold, it can be tempting to zip up. That's when people die, so don't ever zip up. If I'm cooking in here, I'll probably have a hole about the size of a human head on the upwind side and a hole about 3 times a human head on the downwind side. So if you use that as a rule, you're not going to kill yourself. Prime the stove. And then get it somewhere in the middle of the tent, because you want the greatest height for the flame to work its way upward. Turn it on just until you start seeing a little bit of fuel at the wick. And I do find that the MSR range in this environment are exceptional, and there's really nothing that competes with them for robustness and reliability. In an alpine environment, you could probably find something that would compete, but definitely not in a bash crash polar environment. You need something that can withstand any sort of beating. So once you've got your flame going, turn the fuel off, obviously. Get everything on your drying rack out of the way. Just wave your hand over the top so you're protecting the nylon. And then just as it's about to die, open it up. Now that's a really well managed flame. You're not going to cause any issue. You want a nice blue flame. If you're getting a lot of this yellowing, see, that's a nice blue flame now. Let me show you. If you're getting a lot of yellowing in the flame, you probably don't have enough oxygen in here. So open up more as a test. If the flame disappears when you open up, you know it was an oxygen supply problem. If it doesn't, then you've probably got some carbon or grit and you need to take the stove apart and clean it. So that's kind of a summary of my system for Arctic or Antarctic camping or high alpine camping. It works really well. It's kept me alive over hundreds of days solo in these rough environments. It doesn't have to be all that uncomfortable. It is an uncomfortable environment, but you can, through good management, make it tolerable. Get out there, try it, have some fun.